let's see. I'll dive right in. There's like a sort of a canned introduction that I'll read. Uh, so, hello, thanks for taking the time to talk about your classroom experience with Bootstrap. We're trying to learn how teachers use the curriculum, what brought them to it in the first place, and how it can be improved in the future. I'll be asking a little bit about your own experiences with teaching and programming before Bootstrap, as well as your experience using Bootstrap with your students. You can ask me questions at any time, and you don't need to talk about anything that makes you uncomfortable. This
Okay.
interview will last up to an hour. Stop the interview at any time. There's
Okay.
no right or wrong answers here. I'm hoping to get the most accurate sense for how things went in your classroom from your perspective. So before we get started, do you have any questions for me?
No, thank you for asking me to help out. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Of course, yeah. So first, let's start off. Tell me a little bit about your background. How did you become a computer science teacher or a math teacher?
That's a good question. So my original major in college, my undergraduate degree was business management, and I ventured out into the business world and did the typical working in a cubicle, 9 to 5 type job, and eventually moved on into human resources and worked in an office. And it seemed like a logical progression for me because I've always been drawn towards working with people rather than just numbers. But the idea of working together on both seemed like human resources and management might allow me to do that. But I realized very quickly that being in human resources didn't make you friends with anybody. In fact, I think it made you enemies with anybody. And if you've ever watched The Office, I always relate back to Toby and his role in the show. And many times I felt like that was me. Although I had the best of intentions, it didn't really go far. So I studied and took the teacher test for math. One of the strong core subjects in business management was math. So, and I enjoyed the material. So I took the test, got my first job teaching, and would never look back. I love being able to go into the classroom every day and teach. As far as computer programming, we did have a little bit. I mean, there was more offered where I went to my undergraduate at Bridgewater State, but because it wasn't my major, I didn't take any more than a couple courses on it. Just introductory technology, and they would integrate it in. Something I've always personally been interested in, just professionally not had an opportunity to learn and a lot of resources to use on it. So as a math teacher, and then someone who is also using technology. Oop, sorry, I'm getting a little feedback.
Oh, here, I'll turn the volume down a little bit.
Yeah, I could hear my own voice echoing back. I'm sorry.
No, that's cool.
All right. So what happened was, sorry, it's very distracting me. I wonder if I can turn off my. I can't do anything about it. Um, but what happened was I'm so sorry, Manuel. You
Oh,
can't hear that.
no, that's okay. That's right. It sounds like it's coming on your end. I mean, here, I'll turn my speaker off completely, so any feedback you get is not coming from me. Here, try saying something now.
Okay, can you hear me? That's perfectly okay. Oh,
Whoa,
it's back.
okay, so it is coming from my computer. All right, I'll turn my speaker down as low as it can possibly go.
All right, can you hear me?
Just barely. Are you getting feedback?
No, I can't hear anything. I'm sorry, because it was a good second after I said anything, but it was full volume and it was throwing me off. I couldn't stop listening to myself.
No worries. Okay, here, so I fixed the volume.
I'm
Go
so
for it.
sorry. So in any case, as a teacher teaching math using technology, I always wanted to make ways that to teach math that were interesting and relevant to the kids. Our school last year moved to a new model of electives for middle school students and had asked me to teach a new math class where students would be using math every other day. It's an every other day class. It's opposite gym class. And the purpose of it is everyday math, where the kids would have applications. I had suggested to my principal about Bootstrap, which I had seen online, and I had shown her how it fit right into our idea of integrating math into a very relevant, a very real, tangible product that the kids would care about. So I taught both classes last year, and it took off like wildfire. We have another teacher teaching it this year in addition to myself. We have a teacher at the high school now who's helping expand our computer science curriculum who also has a math background. And the enrollment this year for the
That's
7th and 8th grade has been so large that they'll actually be offering, they asked me to help plan and offer Bootstrap as an after-school program as well. So it's gone really
that's
well.
wonderful, Adam. So,
Yep.
I just want to make sure I'm clear here on. So you said that you came to be a CS teacher. How?
By by way of teaching math. Uh,
Okay.
and I had offered up the Bootstrap curriculum as a way to integrate math and computer science.
Okay. So your background originally was you were a math teacher.
Yep.
How many years had you been teaching math?
I've been teaching math since last year. I've been teaching in altogether for 6 years. The years before that, I'd been teaching a computer applications class where we touched on all the Microsoft products in addition to a little bit of programming with Scratch.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me a little about your students. So who are the students that you work with?
Well, I get to teach 7th and 8th graders from the town of Pembroke. They're mixed genders, mixed ability levels as far as math goes, but they're all eager to learn computer programming and they're all excited about computers. So as long as they have that all in common, all of those different types of people that come to the classroom are able to share a lot of different ideas for the sake of creating their video game with Bootstrap. It makes a very diverse classroom, but it's a very exciting classroom.
Right. And how do your students feel? I mean, and again, this is sort of forget Bootstrap for a moment. Maybe
Yep.
think back to before you were teaching it.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of tell me in general, the students who walk into your class on the first day, how do they feel about math?
They're all very scared, and it's right in my course of objectives and expectations. The introductory paragraph, it outlines math, and the next sentence says, "If that made you nervous, you know, wait until the end of the semester." You know, and students right off the bat too. Some kids have said, "I'm no good at math. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm really worried." I've had parent phone calls that have said, "We didn't know. We thought this was just making a video game. We didn't realize it required math ahead of time." And I've always said, just try it and give it a shot. And I've never had someone leave and say that they felt like it wasn't the best way they've ever learned math.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
And how do your students feel about programming when they walk in the door that first day?
I think they're interested in it, but they don't have much background on what it is or what it could be. I think programming to them too, especially in the context of video game, they think that the world would revolve around video games and apps for mobile devices. But once we venture out and look at, well, what does use software? What requires input from humans to function? Even just looking around my room, there's a programmable air conditioning unit. The kids talk about what's in their cars. All of the different ways that you could program and use technology, I think, opens their eyes up that this isn't just a one-shot deal to make a video game, but it really opens up a whole avenue of opportunities for them later on down the road that they never really considered. I think when they come in, they have a real strong sense that they know what it's about, but once they take the class, they really understand that there's so much more out there.
Hmm. And how much programming have your kids generally done before they come to you, if any?
Little to none. I think some students may have tried on their own. Some students have said that they've tried Scratch, or they had a librarian resource teacher who maybe offered up a quick Scratch tutorial, and that might have been their only instruction to it, but really none.
Gotcha. Okay. So the next couple of questions focus on the amount of time that you've spent sort of before teaching Bootstrap the first time. So that's, think back to when you made the decision to teach Bootstrap, but you hadn't yet stood up in front of the class and taught it.
Yep.
Can you speak to just sort of how much time or effort you had to put into planning and preparing?
Well, I did take a 1-day, 8-hour intensive workshop, and that was incredible to put me in the position of the student, because up until I had spent a lot of time trying to understand the material myself, and that put me leaps and bounds ahead. As far as getting ready to teach it, once that one day was over, I took notes and I went back and I looked at everything. Um, Probably took me another day to really sit back and look at everything, and process what I had done, and then maybe another day or two to logically plan out what would work, as far as the amount of time that the school was allotting for the class. But the workshop was by far the best way for me to learn the material, and to be prepared to teach it as well. After 8 hours, I would say that 8 hours would probably be my minimum, maybe 3 days on top of that to really feel like I could wrap my head around everything.
Great, great. And before the school year started, what were your plans as far as how it would look in your classroom schedule? So did you already have a plan that it was going to be like every day for a couple of weeks or once a week for a couple of months?
Well, the school had laid out the schedule for me, and the way they had planned it is, it's a semester-long class of just Bootstrap. It wasn't integrated into an existing class, and their model was 2 out of every 6 days would be students taking this class, and during a semester it would equal 30 days, 30 48-minute long periods, which is just enough time to complete everything in the curriculum. But it's great because the students spend an entire class period working on it, which is good, I think, for the flow. But that the 4 days off in our rotation is a bit tricky. But the students do a really good job. It lends us an opportunity to have refreshers as we come back in again about what we did. And I find it does actually keep the momentum a little faster.
Great. And for you, what was the hardest thing about integrating or planning or teaching this thing? Like what was the toughest challenge for teaching Bootstrap your first time through?
Uh, um, I think the hardest part about teaching Bootstrap 1 was that because I don't have a very deep computer science background really at all, other than my unprofessional dabblings and poking around online, when students would ask questions that were things that I'd never encountered myself, it really forced me to reach out to the community and to find answers. I mean, and there are always situations that come up where students will do something that is totally random or off the wall, and in those times I felt like that was when I was most in the moment of panic. But other than that, everything went very well. The materials are all online. Everything is there for us to use, and it really is just a matter of putting the wheels on the ground and getting used to it. So.
Gotcha. Um, so, during the school year, did you wind up did the implementation go the way you expected to when you were planning it out?
It did. I think it went really well during the school year. We had planned that it would be a semester-long class, and we had just enough time to get towards the end, and halfway through the school year, at the end of that first semester, we had students finish with their games right on time the way we had hoped. We had our video game release party that the superintendent even came to in the school committee. So that went better than I had planned. We had planned for just enough time, and the student achievement at the end of it was incredible.
Awesome. How much time during the school year did you spend planning? So, like in a given week, how much work were you doing outside of classroom?
I think that for each of the 9 units, I would probably take a good 2 hours to sit down and plan out my objectives that I could use from the units each day during my time, and then to plan out the assessments for the students afterwards. So I would say maybe another 18 hours on top of, or 18 to 20 hours on top of the excuse me, to plan out the 9 units.
Gotcha. Okay. So, in terms of getting like technology access for the class, did you find it difficult to get computer access?
No, not last year. This year I haven't been able to get access though.
Okay.
But that's a side issue. As far as getting to the website, creating a class Gmail login, it works flawlessly. It's a perfect way for the students to be able to simultaneously log into an environment where they can save their work, but also be able to bring it home, show it to people at home with what they're working on. And then also, if they wanted to, they could open someone else's file if we're working in the same class, and they can kind of take a peek at what someone else is working on while they're working on it. It works great.
Terrific. Awesome. So next, I'm going to list a couple of the resources that we have on our website, and I just want you can answer yes and no. You could answer a lot or a little. Just I want to get a sense for how much you used each one. Okay. So what about the lesson plans?
I would say a lot.
Okay. The student workbooks?
A lot. We downloaded those and printed one for each of the students that came in the door.
Okay. The homework assignments and supplementary exercises that we have.
I use those a lot.
Okay. We've also got warm-up activities for each class.
I use those a lot. Sometimes I use them as a summarizer at the end of the day if it was, if the time had come in that I felt like an assessment wasn't ready, but just a little warm-up to kind of summarize what we had done. But I use those a lot. They're great.
Okay. And we've also got some exit slips that are like little daily mini assessments. Did you use those as well?
I didn't use those too often. But I did always think that that would be a great way to kind of wrap up the class. I had some printed and I never used them. I think I had my heart set on assessments because every 2 days it was hard to put a grade into our grade book, so I would use something a little larger than that. But
yeah. And what about YouTube videos? We've got a couple videos up there.
I don't think I ever used the YouTube videos. I deferred to myself standing in front of the class, but yeah, I could have. I think I actually did refer a couple students to the YouTube videos that weren't able to sign up for the class because of their schedule load, and I did link those to a page where the students could look at them. So I would say I did use them, but not very much.
Okay. And what about the teacher discussion board?
Teacher discussion board, I've looked at a couple times. Unfortunately, I would email directly sometimes for assistance rather than reaching out to the boards. So I did use them occasionally, but not very often.
Okay, great. So now we're going to get into your experience actually teaching the class. Tell me about your experience with the circles of evaluation. How did students react? Were they useful for you as a teacher?
I think they're incredible. The first time I saw them, I thought it was brilliant. And as a visual learner myself, to see a math problem broken down into circles that could very easily be deciphered, it was like an aha moment of why isn't everybody doing this? So teaching it to the kids is an important step for me to make sure that they understand the math behind what they do every day and how to break down complex problems and how that is translated directly into the video game by using it to synthesize their racket code. I love the circles evaluation. I have teachers who've been in my room who've asked when they see it drawn on the whiteboard what it is, and of course I'm all too eager to show it to them, but I have those same teachers now teaching their kids not racket code but just math using the circles of evaluation because they also can see the value in the circle evaluation. It's brilliant.
That's awesome. That's really great. So same question, but the design recipe. How did students react to that, and how do you feel about it as a teacher?
I love the design recipe because I think it levels the playing field for some kids who are used to really grinding out their work as opposed to students who may skip ahead a little too fast. It forces students to slow down and take a look at their work and really understand what they're doing. I love the design recipe to see how you can take apart a complex word problem piece by piece and make something manageable out of it step by step. The kids that really grind it out can totally appreciate it. It's manageable, and they can see the progress from one step to the next of how to start with a word problem and end up with a solution. And I love that the students can then explain to you why their answer is their answer. It's never I think this is the answer, but I don't know how I got it kind of an answer. They can easily go back and see their trail and what they did. And if they make a mistake, or if they find that they need to change something, they can go back and everything is right there for them. And it's very easy to tweak and adjust to make it work. Again, it's a great way for students, to break down a word problem. And I often ask them, I say, would you rather, wrestle a bear or do a word problem? And most often the answer is I would wrestle a bear with one hand tied behind my back instead of doing math problems. But this gives them a tool that they can use, and they appreciate it.
Awesome. And did you have your students working in pairs on the different programming projects?
I did. I was very firm on that. Some students would say that they wanted to work alone, and I would always tell them that the model of the class was to work as in a pair, and I would find someone for them to work with, and they could see the value in that there would be a student typing on the computer while another student was reading to them what they were typing, that there was another pair of eyes to help them see if there was an issue or a problem. But I think also, as far as middle school students go, they're not totally confident. So being able to talk to somebody else built up their confidence, and being able to explain to somebody why something is the way it is meant that at the beginning of a semester, even if kids knew each other, they were very formal and they would talk and they would do their group work. But as it progressed, they were very passionate about the same project, about the same functions they were putting into it, and it really opened up a collaboration more than just group work. And I think it's really important for any age group to be able to work and appreciate what you're doing in something that can take so much time, and you can be so involved in it. It's a really effective teaching tool, and it's a good skill for anybody to have.
Cool. So think about times that students have gotten stuck on an activity, right? Mm-hmm. So you introduce the problem and they're working on it and they just get stuck.
Yep.
How often did you find yourself working back through either, going back to the design recipe with them or using the circles of evaluation with them?
We've worked on it a couple of different ways depending on where they're stuck. I think the most effective way to do it would be to back up to the design recipe with them and plan out, well, what is going into it, and they can logically think, well, maybe I'm trying to add in too many ingredients. Maybe I'm not looking for enough ingredients, and once we can agree on the steps and the partners, we can work forwards. And sometimes in concept, they can understand and appreciate the problem and what's supposed to happen, but they may not be able to break down the actual parts that would make it work, and that's when we may go back and look at the circles if that's the problem and say, well, how are we going to get that answer with those ingredients? Where could we use them to make them work? And so it's a couple different avenues in order to break down a problem. And in combination, the design recipe and the circles of evaluation, two very graphical ways and logical ways for students to break down a problem. So if they do not understand, backing up and relying on those is a rock solid way for them to advance forward. It really works.
Mm. And I know you mentioned earlier that you said some other teachers who are teaching like math classes, you've seen them start to use some of these elements in classes that are not Bootstrap classes, right?
That's correct. Yep.
That's terrific. Do you find yourself doing that? Like when you're working with students on stuff that isn't a Bootstrap class, do you find yourself using those things?
I have. A lot of times, and I teach 7th and 8th graders, those are the only 2 grades in our school. The 8th graders get a senioritis and will often try to just pump out information. They're like, yep, we got it, we're ready for the next thing, and they'll make clumsy mistakes. And it might even be something as, far beyond them as they would think is the order of operations. And so slowing down to look at that and help them break down problems is a really effective tool. Kids who say, oh, yeah, I got it, will come back and use that later on. And I have used it in my math applications class. And kids who didn't sign up for the Bootstrap class because they had thought programming was not something they were interested in, would totally appreciate and understand the circles of evaluation. Um, and I find it most effective for students who might have difficulty just knowing where to start in a problem. And my friend who did use it, the teacher, is in uh, he's a special ed teacher, and he found that it worked great to get students started and involved, but thinking about what works and what doesn't work. So when I see students struggling, or if I just see them rushing and making clumsy mistakes, it's a great way to say, well, let's plug this in and see if this works. Let's see if it makes sense.
That's great. So if you were to talk to another teacher and get a sense, and then try to maybe to tell them, like, here are the things that were valuable to me teaching Bootstrap. Like, what if you were to call out the things that you liked? What did you like about it?
I love the fact that Bootstrap stresses that you really have to think about the process, that critical thinking is what gets you to the end, not necessarily knowing the answer, but knowing how to find it. And that it's okay not to know the final outcome, but resiliency and determination are what are going to keep you functioning in it. And as a teacher learning it sometimes along the students, I would find myself wondering and asking questions that they would then ask, but they would be more apt to ask for help from other students and find the answer. And so I thought it was a really exciting way to learn anything, to be able to fail and see it not work, but understand that it's okay for it not to work and you can go back and fix it again. I think that's a hard lesson for a lot of people to do with anything, is in students, especially math, say, well, if I didn't get it, I'm not going to get it. The ship has sailed. That's it. But Bootstrap really stresses that it's okay to make it work and to come back to the tools that you know in order to get something to function. It's a powerful critical thinking tool.
Great. Well, so you talked earlier about the 18 hours and the workshop you put in beforehand before actually teaching it. So when you taught it a second time, or looking forward to teaching it a next time, do you think that the amount of effort that's required to plan and prepare goes down the more you teach it?
Absolutely. I think a lot of my preparation was making sure that I could see all of the tangents and avenues the students might take, so that I could walk into the classroom and hopefully have an answer for those questions that may arise. And that the planning time, excuse me a second here, the planning time did definitely go down once I was able to experience it for the first time, because I knew ahead where the pressure points were. I knew where I could speed up with some of the kids. I knew where I had to slow down and take my time. In the time now, my prep time is very short to get everything ready.
Great. How short are we talking? I mean, originally it sounded like you were saying 18 hours spread out over the course of the year. Now, what are we looking at?
I would say to get ready for each unit, it might take me half an hour just to look over everything again, make sure that I'm planned out. But that's just making sure that I have handouts in place, making sure that I stop at a logical spot and I pick up at a spot that would be beneficial to the kids. It's pretty short. I'd say maybe a half an hour for each of the units.
That's great. Cool. So I want to ask a question that's just about the video game. So setting aside the design recipe, the circles, all of that, how did your students respond just to the use of a video game as a class-wide project?
I think it would be like anything. They're like, what's the catch? What are we really going to make for a video game? Like, we get it. There are lots of instructional things out there that, let us play a game, but then make us answer math questions. They're like, what's the deal, and where's this going to hurt? And so telling kids, no, you will make a fully functioning video game, I think they were like, this is too good to be true. This is unbelievable. But delving in and seeing how it works, I think they understood that it is a video game, but the hitch is not as bad as they thought. because they're learning how it works. And I think that the blow is softened as they can go back and show other people. I think that was more important to them than actually making the video game, was for them to explain how it worked. So.
Interesting. Say more about that. What did you see happening in your students when they were explaining it to others?
There were two girls in particular I can think of from last year. One of them was actually in a pull-out math class. She was with a one-on-one teacher, and she was partnered up with another girl who was in a regular math class but still at a lower level. They struggled, and they made a video game that was used SpongeBob in it, and it was a really funny video game. It was very clever. But what I saw was at a video game release party, the girl who was in a pull-out math class and was selectively mute, didn't talk unless she felt very comfortable, was walking around helping other partners tweak their games. And she would walk up to them and say, "That looks really cool. What are you having trouble with? I see you're working in your code. Can I help you with something?" And so she would take time to help them work through the process of what was not working for them, and then she'd show them her game, and she'd say, "Well, I solved it by doing this, and why don't you try that?" And for me to see a student go halfway through the school year and evolve from somebody who really didn't talk or make eye contact in a math setting to becoming an advocate like that was amazing. And she loved the game, and she enjoyed showing people, but what she really liked was being able to show them how to make her game. And that was a really powerful thing for me. And her math teacher did say that when she was back in the math classroom, her confidence had changed. And they had mentioned it at a meeting, and I said, well, I'm going to take credit for that one, because at the end of our semester, she was immediately she just changed into a different person. And it was amazing. She signed up again this year for Bootstrap 2, so I'm excited to see what she does.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yep.
I'm wondering, did you see, I mean, you've mentioned that you and other teachers have used Bootstrap material, even when not teaching a Bootstrap class. Did you see any of your students do that on their own? Like maybe they'd be working on a problem in a math class, and all of a sudden they just started using a Bootstrap method or something like that?
I didn't. Well, not without prompting. They forget about it, because I think in a math setting, and I have students say to me, well, this teacher tells me how to do it this way, so they always want to stay with what the teacher tells them. And I was teaching another math teacher's class one day while she was out, and the worksheet they were working on was word problems. And the kids were staring at the ceiling and staring at the floor, and there were a couple of kids that had been in my elective class. And so I walked over to them, and I was like, is everything okay? How's it going? And they're like, we don't even know where to start. And I was like, well, how do you not know? I mean, the design recipe is one of your tools. And the connection that they weren't making a video game, but this would still apply, hadn't occurred, I think, because they were trying to follow the method that the teacher had told them. And so I said, why don't you try that instead? And immediately the worksheet was done. And the kids that were in the Bootstrap elective were finished. And then they turned around and they partnered up with other kids, and they're like, let me show you how this works. Let's talk about domain and range, something that they weren't going to talk about in math class for months. So without prompting, I think that they were hesitant to try it in another classroom. But as soon as they saw it works, no matter the venue, they were more than eager to use it.
Awesome. So a couple of questions here, and for each of these, I guess what I'm looking for is positive impact, negative impact, or no impact, that sort of thing. But of course, feel free to go into detail. So first, how would you describe Bootstrap's impact on your students' interest in computer science and programming?
What are my choices again? Huge impact?
Well, no, was it positive? Was it negative? Absolutely. Did it really not change?
No, it definitely increased the student. It was a very positive change. There were students who would come to me they were writing their own programs, their own definitions. A student wrote a program that would allow you to add up the number value of all of the letters in your name given their place in the alphabet. Things that they just wanted to do just went through the roof. It had a very positive impact.
Awesome. What about their confidence in programming?
Students, I think that their confidence definitely increased. It was a very positive uh, change for them. Students would love showing people, and I think they could appreciate when someone would look at it and go, "I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at," but they could walk them through that, and it was the idea that it was something new and different, but they knew how to do it. That really made them feel that they could do anything, because they had that moment themselves once of, I don't know what this is, and once they learned it, they wanted to keep going.
Cool. And what about their interest in math overall?
Some students had said to me, "Why aren't we taught math like this in the math classroom? Because this makes sense to me." The units that we're working on right now at the beginning here, Unit 1, and plotting out the coordinates of a video game character, and the students can see that in the math class you very typically find just a point rather than a series of points. So they were really thinking about what part of their video game character they were going to plot, and how to describe its movement. And thinking about that for the students, they were like, we get why X and Y is important, that it's a very specific way and a very real way to plot the position of an object in space. And so but the idea of X and Y, after we played around with it a little bit, students who couldn't quite remember which was which totally remembered in the context of a video game of the movement and everything. The Pythagorean theorem, something that makes 8th grade students cringe and 7th grade students cry. Immediately, they all wanted it to work, and they wanted to understand how it works to make their game work. And 8th graders who had already learned it had said, "This makes perfect sense. It's the most useful thing I've ever learned in math class. They're like, I love this." So the context of the video game and seeing the actual math work, I think definitely and positively increased their confidence in math.
Fantastic. So, if you had to summarize sort of what your students get out of the class, what does a student in Pembroke, what does a student in Adam Newell's class get out of Bootstrap?
I think that what students get is the confidence that it's okay not to know, but it's not okay to try. It's not okay to dig in and try to find the answer. Bootstrap, I think, gives students that the tools they need to break down problems, and to synthesize an answer that makes sense and that they can stand behind, rather than say, well, I think I know this, and I'm pretty sure it's right. But they can check their own work, and they know before they do anything with it that it works. They get that real confidence that what they're learning is not necessarily going to be used later, but it can be used right now. And the tangible proof is that they have a fully functional video game in front of them. And I like to think that my students leave my classroom excited to use their knowledge, that they're okay knowing that they don't always know and that they can fail, but they can fix it, but that they also have the ability to do something incredibly awesome if they're willing to put in the time and effort to really see it through.
That's great. Well, so last question here. I mean, you've been teaching for years now. You're a math teacher for a number of years, computer science now.
Yep.
Do you? How do you think, if at all, teaching Bootstrap has integrated, or like how has your teaching practice changed, if at all, based on the experience?
I think my teaching model used to be that I know all the answers, and I'll walk into the classroom, I'm going to give the lesson. At the end of the lesson, the kids are going to recite back to me and say back to me this, this, and this, and I'll know that they know it by answering these questions on a test. Bootstrap has pushed me out to say it's okay not to know. I think that walking into the classroom and saying, this is my plan and this is my objective, is never going to change, but how we're going to get there changes. and that adapting and changing and learning how to grow right in the moment is where education should be. That students are in front of us and they require different needs, and Bootstrap is a really great way to break down to a diverse audience and to give all students the same opportunity to learn something rather than just my canned lesson that is going to be taught to everybody the same way. I think it's a really exciting way to learn. I like to teach on my feet. I like to get up and walk around and then have something to take away from it, and Bootstrap caters to all of that for me.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, thank you so much for your time. Especially, I know it's a weekday night, so I don't want to keep you any longer. But you've been really fantastic.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate talking with you. I'm sorry we had some technical difficulties.
No worries. No worries. All right. Well, hey, have a great rest of the evening, and we'll talk soon.
That sounds great. Thanks, Emmanuel.
Take care. Bye.